Welcome to the Rainmaker podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading Rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. Ooh, do we have a good one for you today? Easily one of my most favorite recorded episodes to date with one of the smartest women I know. Please meet Eleanor Beaton, the founder of Safi Media, an education and business coaching company that backs bold women leaders who are advancing gender equity through entrepreneurship. Eleanor and I had a truly paradigm-shifting conversation where we discussed, one, an actionable way to build a personal brand for marketers in every stage of their career. Two, aligning your personal brand with the company's mission and vision in a way I've never heard of before. Three, the importance of building triggers around your personal brand so people remember you. And four, we get raw and dirty about the unspoken hardships of being a fractional CMO. I cannot wait for you to listen to this podcast episode. So without further ado, let's make it rain with Eleanor Beaton. Eleanor, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we were just saying before we officially turned on record that number one, we just actually did a whole roundtable discussion earlier today. So we are wildly warm up. So buckle up.
Exactly. Get ready. Brace yourself.
Number two, Eleanor is also a personal friend of mine and somebody that I hold in the highest esteem. In fact, I invited her as a guest speaker, as like the speaker for my Dreaming Big event in Mexico this past April with all of our CEOs or visionary CEOs. And so to have her on the podcast, I'm humbled yet again. And you have to take notes. So if you're listening, pull over. If you're whatever, you're going to want to take notes because she blew my CEO minds away. And she really helps you unapologetically own your personal brand, which is what both CEOs and aspiring marketing leaders struggle with. Because how do you differentiate when everybody else is a marketing leader? She's a fractional CMO. He's a fractional CMO. Like, I want to write a book one day. I want to speak on stage one day. But when my acumen or my LinkedIn looks eerily familiar to somebody else's, how do I find the voice amongst the noise? And I think, number one, your personal brand, I'm obsessed with. I think you've done a phenomenal job being classy and unapologetic and attracting big contracts yourself, but then also serving aspiring entrepreneurs. This is your specialty. This is your thing. This is how you help people succeed. So like, where do we even begin? Just set the stage. This marketer wants to work on their personal brand. Let's start with a scenario where they're currently employed and they're freaking out. But if they were to start working on their personal brand while employed, this could look bad or they could get fired. That's a lot of the fear. So let's start with that scenario.
Yeah. Well, you mean in terms of how they deal with the fear or how they actually do it?
How do you, well, both. Like, what did you learn? I started working on my personal brand while I was still employed too. So like, how do you start seeding it without it feeling like a distraction? Yeah. And then also the intentionality behind it too.
This is a great question. So I have a couple of examples, and I actually think that, finding examples and exemplars of people who model how it's done is incredibly effective. So this is for marketers, people who are working inside organizations. And so I think about HubSpot, which is obviously a marketing CRM and so much more than that. So you guys would all be familiar with this. And I believe she's still with the company. She was their chief HR officer. Their chief people officer. And so when she was when HubSpot was a lot smaller, she was their chief people officer. And the biggest challenge that they had was recruiting marketing talent fast enough to be able to keep up with the growth of their platform.
Yeah, they've exploded.
Right? Yes. And so the biggest challenge for any team like that is really making sure that they have the best and the brightest. And so I remember she was a guest on my podcast back when it was called Fierce Feminine Leadership. And what I was so impressed about was her ability as a speaker to connect her own personal stories, insights, and experience with the larger vision and mission of the company. And so I think that is when you stand for a vision or a mission, And when you show your personal
Mm.
connection to the vision or the mission of the organization that you are representing,
Yeah.
you literally cannot go wrong, because
Mm.
everything that you do to build your brand will build the brand of that organization also. So it becomes a win-win scenario. Now, that's not to say that there could not be internal sniping
Sure.
or, some tall poppy stuff. But when we align ourselves with a broader mission, uh, you become much more unassailable than when it looks like you are really sort of trying desperately to build a brand to line yourself up for your next offer.
For your next gig, yeah, for
Yeah,
the jump that everyone assumes you're doing it for.
exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
real. Like, there's so much about working inside organizations that is about managing reputation. It's a bit of a lift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got to find the source of this quote. Actually, it was Mary Zarnecki who shared it with me,
Mm.
one of our coaches in the Rainmaker residency program. But she was saying that 82% of Americans will attribute a more positive association with an organization when and where their leaders have their own personal brands as well.
Mm.
And then I also remember when Elon Musk had, like, before he bought Twitter, he tweeted things that inflated the value of the stock, which is a big no, not allowed. And a lot of whispered repercussions were coming his way, but they didn't remove him from the board because they were worried about the negative decline of stock valuation if they were to do that because of the value of his brand equity. I was like, stop it. So his personal brand literally saved his ass.
Oh, that's
Which
so
is now he
interesting.
bought Twitter with I mean, just the whole thing. But
Yeah.
yes, when companies actually don't hide their talent, but put up their talent, and then to your point, if somebody's wise enough to align personal values and mission, with company
Right.
values and mission, gold star student. Well played.
And the other thing too, of course, is that you can never be small enough or shrink yourself enough to cure someone else's fear and insecurity, right?
Sorry, I'm just having a moment.
Like, it's
So
just
good.
an impossible, it's just it's just an impossible battle to win. And
Yeah,
I really feel, for women who, and, for many folks, and I know it's all kinds of marketers, but marketing
sure.
is a profession that it has a lot of women
A
inside it.
lot of females, a lot of female
Yeah.
creatives. Yep.
For women, we can so easily become targets, as
Mm.
we start to stand out and shine, or we can also be more sensitive to criticism,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so I think that's worth reminding everybody of.
Yeah. Well, and I think the irony is, I mean, for me as a young woman starting her career in marketing, I mean, I'm still kind of baby faced, but I was like really
Mhm.
baby faced. And so I wanted to be taken seriously so bad,
Yeah.
so bad. Right. So then you fall in line very quickly. Like
Hmm.
that's where the psychological safety is felt. Like
Yeah.
I want to get to the top. I want to be like everybody else. I'm going to look the part, walk the talk. I'm just going to do the things. But the irony is there's no greater professional equalizer in a relationship than two people that know their worth.
So true.
Right. And so
Yes.
when you actually show up unapologetically in your own brand as an asset, you actually take back the power that you felt like you were gaining by
Mm.
just being like everybody else. It's just wild. And that did not click for me for too long in my own marketing career, sadly. And
Mm.
so I'm like, if I can scream it from the mountaintops, I will. But
Yeah.
yes, there's no greater equalizer than actually working on your number one asset, which is you, for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so let's take another scenario, because a lot of marketers that come into my world, they've now taken the leap in entrepreneurship. So
Hmm.
they were a marketer for someone else, and now they're taking the leap. And sometimes, really common, is we go out to the world of entrepreneurship doing magic for others as
Hmm.
opposed to doing magic for one employer. So a lot of marketing service providers, maybe they're more ambitious, so now marketing agency owners, but like we're getting into the world of like, I can do something really, really cool with my hands, and you're going to pay me for that asset. You're going to pay me for the execution of marketing, magic. I remember when I was an agency owner, the number one source of leads was stages.
Mm,
So I would
yeah.
hit these marketing conferences and it was really hard because my boys were really young. So I was like this road
Yes.
warrior, and I had two little ones on bottles and diapers and all the
I went
things.
through
It's
that. Oh my
hard.
gosh. It was harrowing.
It's really, really hard, but it was wildly effective because I get on stage
Mhm.
for 30 minutes, just being the expert that I was in whatever marketing thing, whether it's Facebook ads or whatever. And then I'd get the calls afterwards, like, oh, do you take on clients, or, things
Mhm.
like that. So that's how I used my personal brand in that specific marketing capacity when I had my own agency. I don't know if you want to add more dimension to that than
Yeah.
what I've already prescribed.
So that's such a genius. I always found that speaking was the fastest path to cash by far,
Right?
or the fastest way to have someone transfer from never having known you to
Yeah.
actually hiring you. There's just so much invested authority in somebody willing to stand up and speak.
Mm.
Yeah, so I totally concur with that. So I'm going to share something different because I know, like your audience, they're reading the blogs, they know it all. They're very smart. Only the best
You're
and brightest
super
go into
smart.
marketing, let's be honest. So, and also then the double thing of listening to this podcast too. So I know that if I show up with anything that's like trendy, they're like, "Oh, please, are you serious? We read that 3 days ago. Enough." So here's what I want to share. And I learned this concept from, he's a tech entrepreneur,
Mhm.
and his name is Rob Fitzpatrick. And he talks about recommendation loops. And so it's this idea that, okay, you really see it with respect to books.
Mhm.
So, what's the book that you most recently recommended to somebody?
Gosh, I mean, like
Think
Alex
about it.
Hormozy's book have been
Yeah.
everywhere this
Yeah.
year in
Cool.
the
So,
marketing
you've
world. Yeah.
recommended that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why did you recommend it to a specific person? What were they going through that had you recommend that book?
They were complaining about leads, and
Okay.
he just came out with the leads book that he
Got it.
did, the blue book. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So they were complaining about leads, and you're like, it
Mm-hmm.
triggers
Mm-hmm.
a memory, which is this
Mm-hmm.
solution,
Resource. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a resource. So the idea is that there's not a single best book on, or a single best marketer on a broad area. There's
Mm-hmm.
usually a single best book or a single best marketer for a specific moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times when you're building a brand, what you're actually trying to do is build memorability, right? You're trying to build memorability in a moment.
Okay.
And when you think of, so that when when a problem comes up, you are
The brain
associated with a
fires.
moment, the
Yep.
brain fires, and you are recommended. And
Yep.
I think too many of us, so we think about this with respect to things like product development, but we don't think about this with respect to us or our career as the product.
Yep.
And so I really encourage people to kind of go back through and to start to think about the circumstances or the experiences or when in your career. You could even do like a timeline. So, if you've been in the business for 15 years, year by year, what was your biggest win? And what was the circumstance that initiated that win? So some people might be like, you know what? I am actually the person who I think about, like an Emily Kramer, who's a great marketer that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And her trigger is she's the person who helps companies hire their first marketer, because who you hire as your first marketer is huge. It's usually a mishire. You know what I mean? Hiring the first,
Well, they
all about
burn through
this,
so many
right?
marketers. I know.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so it's like that's the trigger. A software company is trying to hire marketer number one. They've usually hired a ton of other employees by that time because they're mostly product led growth. But
Product. Yep.
you know what I mean? And so that's the trigger. So I think folks can really build a brand, not simply with airbrushed pictures and like being at every opening included those of envelopes, but also like by really understanding what are the triggers that elicit your best work, and how can you start to associate yourself on purpose with those triggers to get recommendation loops going.
I feel I don't know if you've heard of his work, but you would love this book by Jay Bear called Talk Triggers.
Oh,
And it's pink, and it has I'm pretty sure it's pink. Again,
yeah.
this is what I haven't seen it in forever, but look how the brain works.
Yes.
Pink, and there's a llama on the cover. And I'm pretty sure when he launched the book, he sent it out with like stuffed llamas in
Oh, come on.
the care
He's
package.
so smart.
But he talks about companies intentionally using and building talk triggers in their businesses. So like DoubleTree hotels with the warm chocolate chip cookies when you check
Yes.
in, or going to the Cheesecake Factory that has like a Bible of a menu. Like it's a
Yeah.
Bible, literally. You can go to like First Corinthians and like all the
Mm-hmm.
cheesecakes. It's just insane, right? But these are intentional moves for companies to create memorabilia, or like just the memory, just like you said, like
Mm-hmm.
just those triggers, like, where can we go where like everybody will be bloody happy? Because picking a restaurant with your family is an impossible task. And the Cheesecake Factory has like a menu for everybody and their dog. So like it's a great book, and it just reminds me of this. It's written from the narrative of companies, not
Mm-hmm.
personal brands to my memory, but it's the same concept.
Yeah, totally.
And if I think of my own personal brand,
Mm.
I've done something very similar.
Mm.
I've definitely planted my flag with the Rainmaker
Yeah.
and this kind of rust color red. And everyone's like, oh, how did you pick that color? Did you go through like a $20,000 like package to like get your profile? No. I took a picture of my favorite rug in my house and I
Mm.
sent it to my designer. This is true.
Yeah.
And I sent it to my designer. I'm like, this rug is me.
Yeah.
Everything to do with this rug is me. The terracotta colors
Mm.
is me.
Yeah.
And then I took a picture of my closet. I'm like, this too is what I wear. So
Yes.
like
Yes.
literally how I show up is also who I am when I'm not on
Mm-hmm.
public camera and stuff like that. But, and I know what you're saying goes beyond just color choices and like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
the lady with the famed red glasses, or like, I
Mm-hmm.
understand that it's more than that, but just the intentionality behind what you're suggesting is everything.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of us don't have that,
Yes.
which then brings me to my third marketer scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So another common marketer that comes into my world to help them is like the fractional marketer. So
Mm-hmm.
at this point, they are no longer getting paid for doing, they are getting paid for thinking. So the
Yeah.
consultant, the strategist, the fractional CMO, like you are basically lending out your strategy, your brain, your plans to, a variety of clients at any given time. Hey Rainmakers, it's Veronica, and we'll get back to today's episode. But before that, I have an exciting invitation for all of you aspiring, ambitious marketing leaders. If you are serious about advancing your career in marketing and you're looking for an expert to give you some personal insights, guidance, tips, then I'm going to invite you to schedule a free Pathway to Promotion call with me. This is a special one-on-one call with just you and me to discuss your current roadblocks in your career, your long-term aspirations and ambition, and the next best step for you and your personal promotion. Head to pathwaycall.com or click the link in my show notes to schedule your free Pathway to Promotion call. Now back to today's episode. How does one fractional CMO differentiate from another fractional CMO and another one and another one? And so like they're already there, like they're already now getting paid at least for their human capital versus just their hands, which is very exciting. And now there's programs out there that are trying to, convert everybody into a fractional CMO. But at some point, how do you also now differentiate?
Yeah. Oh, so good. I mean, I think that, and it's interesting. I can remember this one was when I was a consultant, by the way. So I was a communications consultant, and I can remember talking to a CEO, and he was saying the difference between a consultant and a team member is like the difference between bacon and eggs. Okay. One is really committed. It was so good. But I think any savvy CEO or decision maker internally who hires a fractional person I think this is important to understand. Like if you're a fractional person, understand there is, even inside the most supportive, there's going to be generally with any kind of sophisticated, because if you're a fractional, you're typically not selling either mid-market or enterprise. You are selling to SMBs. And so SMBs you're generally going to be selling to the CEO or founder / core decision maker who's generally fairly strategic. If they have a business that is going to require them to have a fractional CMO versus bringing in house. Yeah. So all of that is like context. So you're dealing with somebody who probably has a little bit of skepticism and who understands this is an expensive hire if you're pricing properly. You know what I mean? But the reason it's expensive is because you have some results riding on your ass. You do. You know what I mean? That's why I love people who are willing to do that, because I'm like, I see you. I see that you are willing to, you're not just going to tell people how to do it. A part of your job is to create the strategy, but if the strategy can't be implemented, you will wear that. So that's, I think, what people don't realize. It's not just like people who command money like that, they're assuming reputational risk every time they do it
Every single time.
for a team they didn't hire.
Say it again.
Right? You gotta love that.
Say
Like
it again.
right? I'm just like, so partly I'm like, good Lord, you're brave. Good Lord, you're brave. And then also, right, like what they take on. So to me, again, when I think about all of that, because this is the other side of branding, which is service providers, it's based on reputation. So you have to be so picky about who you take on because you know, your reputation grows on your customer success. So on that side, I would say one of the things that I wish I saw more of was again, a trigger thing where you are the CMO who focuses on this. This is your versus I can do it all.
Yep.
Which creates huge scope creep. It creates a lot of
Every
headaches
time.
for you every time.
Yep.
And you don't get the recommendation loop going because it's quite general.
I completely agree. And let me add to that. So like you can say, oh, okay, well, I'm a fractional CMO that specializes in e-commerce. E-commerce is my jam. Or I'm a fractional CMO that's really good when it comes to working with like personal brands, like Jenna Kutcher. Jenna Kutcher recorded a podcast where she's like, I got my fractional CMO from a LinkedIn, DM. Like she slid into my DMs. Right. So then everyone's like, who is it? I want to like immediately hired her. Right. Like, oh my, I can't even imagine. Whoa. But so you can say, oh, I'm a specialist in this particular vertical or client type.
Yeah.
But I think you go deeper.
Yeah.
I think you go deeper because a Jenna Kutcher is in a wildly different stage in her career than somebody who wants to be a Jenna Kutcher who is just getting started. So maybe potentially same industry, like we're online education providers, we're an online personality.
Yes.
But the stage of business is also very different. And so like as a fractional consultant strategist CMO, vertical is one thing. What stage of growth are you best at?
Yes.
Like some of you could be really great at like those like really dirty kind of 600,000, multiple 6-figure stage. And some of you are like, no, I don't even play underneath 8 figures because what I'm used to is I'm used to this level of capital. I'm used to this level of operations before I walk on the scene. Like I can't be the only member of your team and you hire me as a fractional CMO.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are entering those type of agreements and it scares me for them.
It scares me for them because there's nothing needier than a CEO of a small company who has no other marketing support. Like you are going to be everything. And your ability to pull stuff off. Yeah. So, wow. I hope we didn't scare. If you, no, because the people who are, the people who are doing it are brave already. But I think it's important to have like legitimate conversations about what's expected because otherwise it's very much a sort of aspiration based, like affirmation based. There's a lot of advice that's affirmation based. I'm like, I don't think everybody understands just how skeptical. There's a ton of healthy skepticism that any strategic leader has where they're hopeful for the best, but they do understand and they will hold you accountable.
Well, and then it puts these beautiful, risk-taking marketers who have the best hearts and it puts them in positions to fail.
Yeah.
Right from the jump, because when there is an absence of people to execute your strategy, you don't want that to fall on you exactly what you just said. So then you go into savior mode and you rescue because and so does the person that purchased your services, even though it's not services, it's consultancy, but they know that you can lay a golden egg. They know that you can write sales copy. They know that you can design something. They know that you can. And so then comes the tears or comes the last minute things and we're in a crisis and everything that you've been planning for the last 90 days is going to go down the drain unless you can help me write this sales copy right now.
Yes.
What?
Yeah. What did you say? Yeah.
And there's no money for going outside of scope. I'm just supposed to do it. And then, so it's the savior complex, the rescuer that starts, and especially amongst my female marketers in particular that get, for all the reasons that you and I even talked about in our roundtable earlier, because we're used to being in that support role, like totally for how many generations of time. So anyways, it's just, I think more honest conversations, please.
Yeah. And there's just one more thing I'll add to that.
Please.
I think that it's like the type of business, the stage of the business, and what stage of the whole funnel are you best at?
Mm.
Because I think you also need to like really claim that, because sometimes, I've had people who are fantastic middle of funnel,
Yeah.
best. But if that's not clear and you think they're a top of funnel person,
Hmm.
that's such a different. So again, it's about
Hmm.
clarification and owning,
Hmm.
of that trigger, that recommendation trigger skill.
Do you know what's interesting? I'm actually so literally we're recording this podcast a week before I'm hosting my Making It Rain event for my Rainmakers and the CEOs, and I'm doing a whole presentation on like the prospect journey, but not as like basic as that. It's more like, where are your points of friction?
Mm,
Right? Is it traffic problem? Is it the conversion to a lead problem? Is it the
yes.
conversion to a customer problem? Is it like long term? Like,
Yeah.
where is the point of friction? Because to your point, there are some marketers who are phenomenal at some friction points, but not others. And
Yes.
they're also phenomenal at certain types of marketing. So, like, let's say search marketing versus paid marketing versus like, so that also is really important depending on the nature of the company and how fast you want to,
Yeah.
how fast is your sales cycle? Do you want like a one
Exactly.
click conversion, or are we
Yeah.
talking like a 6 month, 9 month sales
Yeah.
cycle because this is corporate sales?
Yeah.
So that all matters 100% what you're saying. Okay. Is there any little final, before you get to ask me whatever you want to
Mm.
ask me, is there any final little tidbits that you'd want to sprinkle for these aspiring marketers who want to be building personal brands and have intentionality behind it, but get caught up a little bit in the imposter syndrome of how
Hmm.
am I any different than anyone else?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think in those kinds of cases, and it sort of loops back to our initial conversation. So I always think about, I call it like quadrant one and quadrant two, but quadrant one is always about like your willingness to acquire deep expertise. So deep expertise in a specific area is very, very helpful when you are able to go deep in an area, and in a specific area and build up skill in that specific area. It's very powerful, and it will do you a lot of good to generate that kind of expertise, whether it's a type of industry, whether it's a funnel stage, a business
Right.
development stage, all of those things. I think choosing and going deep in an area is really useful. But I think the thing that people, and just becoming nerdy about something and
Mm,
allowing yourself to become nerdy about something is helpful. But beyond that, I think the interesting thing about marketing is that marketing is culture now more than ever before. Like, marketing is one of the biggest culture shapers there is, right?
amen.
And marketers set the culture, they're responding to things, they're popularizing things, and so I feel like any great marketer is talking about and should be thinking about, or there's an opportunity to be thinking about how the work that you're doing, how marketing as a discipline shapes the culture that gets presidents elected or not elected, that gets laws passed or not passed, that gets, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
huge power that sometimes marketers, I don't think, necessarily realize, because we tend to think of the big thing as pushing that commercial interest that we have. But
Sure.
actually, it's generally shaping a broader cultural agenda, and people have all kinds of opinions about that, and that's okay. But I think just tapping into the broader cultural impact of the work that you do really helps you to see yourself in a different light, and in terms of what you truly are and the work you're truly doing.
Yeah. For me, I'm often reminded that I just don't think big enough.
Mm,
It's this perspective that, because, and especially for my beautiful marketers, we're so in the weeds.
totally.
We're so in
Totally.
the trenches of the
Yes.
Asana boards
Oh my God.
and the
Right.
garbage and the
Yes.
things. And so, like, having dedicated, carved out space away from the norm to even have that level of perspective, to be given permission to have and entertain that level of perspective, is afforded to almost none
Yeah.
unless intentionally carved out or provided for someone, right?
Mm,
And so, like, I just really appreciate that, because I mean, you and I are both in it. We're the entrepreneurs. We're grinding it out, building our companies because we have this passion.
mhm.
We've been called to do the work that we're doing. And then these beautiful rainmakers, aspiring rainmakers, they too have that same nudge. They just don't know what to do with it yet most of
Yes.
the time. And so, like, I just think this is a really beautiful conversation that I hope more than anything gives a lot of people permission to think
Yeah.
bigger because of what you just shared. All right, your turn. What do you want to call me out on? Close
Okay.
this out.
So I know,
No
right?
pressure.
So I know. So here's a question for you. What do you consider to be the most exciting lead generation opportunity on the horizon for you in 2024?
Okay, I actually have an answer for you on this one.
Let's go.
I have been giving this a lot of freaking talk,
Yeah.
a lot of freaking talk, a lot of freaking thought. You can't beat human.
Mm.
So, like, AI can literally pump out 25 lead magnets for you and me right now. I can tell AI, I want a calculator, I want a script, I want a quiz, I want a this. It doesn't matter. I can pump it out.
Yeah.
The thing that can't be substituted at all, even when softwares can do the bulk of the work for every single person listening, is the human. And so I have literally just informed everybody on my team that there will be nothing will be coming out of our world that doesn't leverage voice of thought leadership. So if that's video of me or any one of my coaches speaking, if it's a podcast episode, there is nothing that will come out that doesn't have a plug into voice of person.
And do you mean audio or literal,
Any
like
of it.
actual voice or literal voice?
Private
like written
podcasts.
voice? Yeah.
Private podcasts.
Yes.
Video series. Roundtables like what you just did earlier.
Yes.
That was brilliant.
Why, thank you.
Let's do a quiz.
Yes.
Take a quiz. Let's say we build a quiz that shows our marketers, are you being overpaid, underpaid, or like take the assessment and we're going to tell you.
Oh, you're such a killer.
Because
that's
think
so
about
good.
it. Most of these
It's
marketers, they're
It's
going to
true.
Glassdoor, they're going to salary.com. They're trying to
Yes.
figure out, am I getting paid what I should be
Yeah.
getting paid? Am I
Yes.
undervalued, overvalued?
Yeah.
What's happening? Because most feel underpaid, but is
Yeah.
that validated by data?
Yes.
Right? So, okay, fine. We can do that. We can build out an assessment. AI can do that.
Yeah.
This is not revolutionary, but what is unique is that on the backside of this assessment or on the backside of this quiz is 5 curated podcast episodes based off your result that is me talking or me sharing our podcast episode to the fractional CMO that takes the quiz. You can't like,
yeah, it's true.
This is the thing. This is the thing that differentiates all of us using all of the same tricks and tips and hacks and all of the same softwares. And so like I have given this a lot of thought because I have recently been on a ton of like, I don't want to call them sales calls, but they're like pathway calls or people trying to figure out their next move.
Yeah.
And what I hear over and over and over again is like, yeah, I didn't know you existed. And then I found you and then I went down the hole. So they started binging my content on social media or like, yeah, I listened to 4 or 5 podcast episodes. Okay. If I know this is happening further down the funnel, why am I also not front loading it up? Because that would just cut the sales cycle anyway. So like all of that is what's playing through my mind right now. And I was recently, you know her, Jordan Wiggins.
Yes.
We love Jordan Wiggins.
We love Jordan.
I was in her I've been in her intimacy group for like almost a year now. And we were all sitting around the table and these are radically different women. I mean, none of us are the same.
Yeah.
From all walks of life. Like none of us have anything in common other than working on our intimacy life through her. And so I'm like, I'm such a marketer. I'm like, so can I pose a question to the table? How did you all find Jordan? Like, how did you all come to even being here? And all of them said, I heard her. I saw her speak. They heard her. Name it in any kind of medium, but they heard her. And I told Jordan, like, if you are not leveraging, because she's a book author too. So I'm like, sorry to the book. But if you're not leveraging your number one asset, which is the voice.
Yes.
Because she has this like really intoxicating voice, but then she's talking about all this like sexual content. You're like, what is happening right now?
And it's so to the max.
Yes. If you're not leveraging that literally in everything that you're doing, you're missing out on an enormous amount of money because people will give you their money.
And you know what else is very interesting about this?
Please.
So I was a journalist first. That was my first career. Yeah. And I was actually a radio journalist first. And the interesting thing about radio when we were studying, where they were always talking about how, so this mostly relates to things like audio podcasts, you know, that kind of thing. But sound is very powerful to us in utero. Before we can really see anything, we're hearing. And so, especially with things like audio, they're also very intimate because every sense that you remove hyper tunes you to that other sense. So just kind of an interesting thing to add. I love what you just said I can tell you've been thinking about it, because that's a very thoughtful response.
Oh, yeah.
And it is like, do you mind if I borrow that? I'm going to borrow that.
You can do, I just shared it. Listen, again, because here's the thing. I don't have this scarcity mindset. If you and I literally come out with the same quiz or same style
Yeah.
or same, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
to me, because people will choose you because they resonate
Yes.
with the messenger. Like,
Yes. And the
I heard this
voice.
when I was
Yeah.
studying, when I did public speaking work with Heroic Public Speaking, Michael and Amy Port.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Michael who said, like, you don't have to say anything different to make a difference, because you're not giving credit to the messenger. So whether Jesus Christ says something or somebody else
Yeah.
says it, like, messenger also counts.
Yeah.
And so, like, if people are resonating with you, Eleanor,
Mm-hmm.
that's not because I'm less than. It's just
Yeah.
because they're really resonating with you. It's no different than when I was growing up and I liked Belle of all the princesses because she was the
Yes.
only one that was brunette and read a book.
Yes.
And I wasn't this little Cuban girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. I wasn't.
Mm.
And so, like, messenger counts. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, like, to me, go for it. Build your business. I'm
Yeah.
wildly behind and passionate behind your mission anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Love it.
Great question. You got me all spiced up because I really have given this an enormous amount of
Yeah.
thought the last
I can tell.
four-ish months.
Yeah.
As I've been, like, building out and expanding the Rainmaker residency to include more marketers where they can
Yeah.
be found. It's important for them to be seen.
It's true.
Yeah.
And heard.
Okay, well, I'm obsessed with you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Obviously, everybody knows, go to the show notes, follow me, follow her, follow all the things. We'll do all the magic and the linking and all the things. But I just have to say thank you, Eleanor, for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, like, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicarami.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at Via Romney if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.